You're listening to the Surgeons of Horror podcast. Hello, welcome to the Surgeons of Horror podcast. Its purpose is to dissect horror films, both old and new. This latest season, we've been dedicating to the late, great Wes Craven, and those that have been tuned in would know that part of that has been what we've been called the middle years. I've dubbed it the nightmare years because we've been bookending it with A Nightmare on Elm Street right through to his Wes Craven's New Nightmare film. Which hopefully some of the podcasters out there who've been kind of listening to us along the way have kind of realized that we've done those particular films. And we've been combining it with the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise, of which we are nearly at the end of. We've just got 2 more to go. We've got the remake that is coming up in a couple of episodes' time, but we're going to get straight into, Freddy versus Jason. You've seen it on the podcast episode title. And we are going to discuss these 2 classic slasher icons going head to head. So, but before we do that, I should introduce myself. I'm the lead host for the podcast series. My name is Saul Muerte, and I am joined with a couple of my colleagues here from the Surgeons of Horror team as we are pitting Freddy Krueger, and those who've been listening to us know that I've been joined by Oscar Jack for the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise, and he's joining us on board to discuss that journey with us to this pinnacle that is where we meet these 2 slasher icons. So welcome aboard firstly to Oscar. Thanks for joining us.
Oh, it's very happy to be back.
And in the bloody corner on my right hand side, joining me in the Jason Bandcamp, as it were, is Miles Davies, who's joined us because he went on that journey likewise for the Friday the 13th franchise, which we did a couple of seasons back. We've been kind of peppering it through along the way. And it's hard to believe that this will be our final discussion on the Jason franchise, unless they do get the law stuff sorted out and, we do get to see Jason again. We don't know. We'll see. But welcome aboard, and thanks for joining us, Miles, for discussing this one.
Yeah, thanks for being on board. Yeah, it's been an epic journey so far.
It has been, and a fun journey. I think both of you will agree that both franchises have brought their element of fun to the equation. Some have been a bit hit and some have been a bit missed,
Some extreme highs, some extreme lows.
Yeah, but I think despite that, I could easily sit down and watch those films again, even the tragic ones. I've enjoyed the journey on both sides of it, So before we get into the Freddy versus Jason film and discuss and dissect the plot line and whether it stands true, whether you would recommend it to a modern going audience. I mean, because this is over 10 years now. 2003 is when it came out, so a long time ago that this one came out. So, and I'll ask that question when we get to the end of the podcast. But before we get into that, now I've obviously kind of pigeonholed you 2 into the Freddy and or Jason areas. And that's merely because we've been on those separate journeys together. But for the sake of the podcast and this journey here, do you firmly sit into those areas? So, Oscar, I've slammed you into the Freddy Krueger journey and that franchise. Are you a Freddy man or are you a Jason man?
Well, I think I am a Freddy man. I think I had seen just slightly more Nightmare on Elm Street films than I had of the Jason Voorhees, the Voorhees family franchise. I think I've only ever actually seen the original first part. Yep. Jason X and Freddy versus Jason.
Oh, wow.
So I'm quite looking forward to going back and listening to the podcast as I go through and watch and fill in all of those blanks of the machete-wielding maniac.
Yeah, I definitely would recommend some, and I think Miles would agree with me here. Like, even like, I think we're both fans of Final Chapter and New Blood off the top of my head from memory.
Yeah, there's a couple. There's like part one's good. Obviously, it's a classic, and what was it episode 7 with the telekinetic girl?
Yeah, pretty sure that was the New Blood one. Yeah, we both like that.
Love the cracker, so yeah, that was like Carrie mixed with Friday the 13th.
I know, it's kind of cool, and it works. So Miles, obviously, like as I've said, likewise with Oscar, like I've pushed you into the Jason camp. Are you a Jason man or are you a Freddy man?
Oh, look, I used to be a bit of both.
Yep.
And I mean, I started off with the original sort of franchise of Friday the 13th because that was pretty much the very first slasher horror film I ever saw on video. We got a video recorder when I was about 13 years old back in the early 80s, and my dad said, "So what films do you want to watch?" When we went to the video store, and we were like, me and my sister was like, "Okay," and we were like, I think I was 13, she was 10. I said Watership Down, and she said Friday the 13th, and he went, "Fuck it, let's do it." And so,
what a combination.
Yeah.
That's a double feature and a half.
All together. And so we watched them both, and then Friday the 13th I was just horrified by, but fascinated by it. So we got that out the next week and the next week. And the
cool.
next week.
I can't believe your dad made you watch Watership Down. That's horrific.
Yeah.
It's terrible. So that's been my Friday the 13th, and Jason's been my original sort of, horror franchise essentially.
Yeah.
And then like a few years later, Freddy Krueger came around, and that was pretty spectacular as well.
Yeah. See, I've shared this journey with the listeners out there and with Oscar, but I do remember the first time I watched A Nightmare on Elm Street, and the whole kind of for me, Freddy was so iconic of the boogeyman, and the fact that he could come out of your dreams. And I used to like playing make believe with my friends and stuff, and we would run around like pretending Freddy was chasing after us, and we'd scare the fucking shit out of ourselves. So for me, that the Freddy image is very different to my journey into Jason and his films. I think if I'm going to be honest, I prefer the Jason journey. But I do kind of like elements of Freddy. There are, particularly the first one, hands down. And as I discussed with Oscar, the Wes Craven's New Nightmare, I just love that take.
Oh man,
twisting that up.
That's just it almost doesn't belong in the franchise. It's that good. It's kind of like it's sort of way ahead of its time.
Yeah. It's such a good movie.
Horror film.
Yeah, for sure. But yeah, and I guess that kind of lends itself, because like I was going back a couple of weeks now, but I was running a movie battle off between the Freddy films and the Jason films, and I had admitted the first Friday the 13th because it's not a Jason vehicle. So, and I feel like I dropped one of the other Jason ones, the one where it's not him, and I think it's the 5th one.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So I deliberately did that because he's not really, it's not really him either. So, but basically, so it was interesting watching it and people's reactions to it, because I put part 2 against the original Nightmare on Elm Street and the original Nightmare 1. I had part 3 against Revenge and part 3 one for Jason. And then Dream Warriors beat Final Chapter, but just very, very close one, that one. And then we had Jason Lives kind of slammed Dream Master, then New Blood slammed Dream Child. So by this point, Jason was taking a firm lead. And I want to say Jason Takes Manhattan kind of won as well. New Nightmare kind of knocked out Final Friday. So Freddy did try and claw his way back in, but the remakes, I should say, the Battle Off went to Jason again. So Jason kind of actually won overall. So it was interesting. Some of them were very close, but it was kind of fun for me to watch that and see how the people thought, and their views and stuff was interesting. Yeah, so I enjoyed doing that. So I may do another one of those down the track. So where does that leave us now? Okay, so Freddy versus Jason then. So let's start talking about that film a little bit. So as I said, it came out in 2003. We had Ronnie Yu coming in as the director. He was responsible for Bride of Chucky and The Bride with White Hair. They're probably like two of his bigger known films. Hasn't really done much outside of that, really. He did The 51st State with Samuel Jackson, which I'd forgotten about. And
that was all right.
He worked on Fearless, the Jet Li film, as well.
Oh, yeah. Bride of Chucky was quite good, actually.
Bride of Chucky's good. Yeah, Chucky to me is the series. Some people kind of hate on Chucky a bit too much. I think he's just so tongue in cheek. You got to roll with that. I think they're fun.
Although
film.
I did try and watch the remake the other day, and it was absolute garbage.
It's crap.
10 minutes in, and I went, this is complete shit.
Yeah, no, I hated it. Absolutely hated it. So what was I going to say? A couple of other facts around it is that of the Friday the 13th series, Freddy versus Jason was the highest grossing film. And it was the second highest in the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise. They did try, and there was an original attempt to try and pit these two guys together, but it failed to gain momentum due to poor box office, which came from Jason Takes Manhattan. And initially, they were touting around having Pinhead cast as a potential further crossover at the end, which obviously didn't come about. The big thing for me, which may be a point to discuss as we go through the movie, is that this doesn't feature Kane Hodder as Jason. He was iconic with the role of playing Jason for the last 4 films leading up to this one. I don't know what your thoughts are on that, Miles, but I'm happy for us to discuss that as we start kind of getting into the nitty-gritty of the film. But that was something that really struck me, and we'll discuss that as we get into the guts of the narrative, as it were. Before we do that, I always do this with the podcast. I just open up and ask both of you. I'll go with Miles first. Do you remember when you first watched Freddy versus Jason, and how long ago was it? How fresh is it for you?
I don't really. I'd been waiting for it, so I kind of knew that it was coming, and so I was just I was interested to see what they would do, and I'd seen the trailer as well, and it looked interesting and looked fun, so it just looked like another, a bit more of a mainstream version of, because Jason's gone so underground with. He pretty much, the last couple of films that he'd done were strictly for the fans of the Friday the 13th franchise. And then this one was a bit more sort of, it's cashing in on the teens in a horror situation type thing. They even had one of the Destiny's Child chicks in it. So it was just like,
I know.
big budget teen slasher film.
Yeah. Yep.
Obviously hopping off the back of the Scream franchise and all of the resurgence in like teen horror films.
Yeah.
So I was just super interested to see this matchup of the two of them together. So
yeah. That's right.
But I didn't go and see it at the cinema. I saw it on I think I saw it on DVD or something. So
I'm pretty sure I did, because I'm hearkening back to 2003. That was actually the year I came out to Australia. Towards the end of that year, so I definitely didn't catch it before I came out to Australia. So I'm thinking that I may have caught it fairly later on, like on DVD, like you said, or a rental or something. I always forget when I first watch movies. I'm so immersed in the horror films that there's a rare occasion where I've gone to see a movie and it's had an impact on me that it sits with me, I can, I guess they're more fresher films, but like that happened to me when I watched Midsummer. That happened to me when I watched Raw, and it happened to me when I watched The Lighthouse. They're the ones that kind of came out, but they're very kind of left of center horror. They're not mainstream like this one is. So it's interesting that I don't recall when I first watched it, but I'm pretty sure it would have happened like you. It would have been, and they may have even caught it at Foxtel, to be honest, when it came around on the the box office stuff, because my earliest role there was that I was working in the creative department there, and for that sometimes we worked hand in hand with the box office team promoting stuff. So I'm pretty sure I ended up watching it through there at some point. So Oscar, what about you? What was when did you first? I mean, you were mentioning how for the Jason kind of stuff, you've only actually watched a kind of small handful of these films, but Freddy versus Jason was one of those. When did you first encounter this film?
I think I caught. I would have caught Freddy versus Jason a couple years after it had come out. I think it was playing on on pay TV, and I on one of the movie channels, and I caught it, and I think I was kind of mid-teen watching it. Like revisiting now, it just kind of gave me so many painful flashbacks. It's so like 2000s.
It is a bit,
yeah. And I remember absolutely loving it, because it is that thing that teen horror is, where it is this like gateway, I think, for so many people. It kind of throws them in, and you kind of, you see it, and you have those brain receptors kind of firing off against, the horror and the gore and the nudity and all of these kind of primal forces. And then afterwards you kind of realize that maybe there are more refined experiences of this than just your kind of basic cash grabby teen, kind of lowest common denominator, get them all in, get everyone in on the dates.
Yeah.
So it was definitely one of my early kind of first kind of hooks into me.
Yeah, for sure.
So I remember having like very kind of fond memories of it, even though, I had like an early girlfriend,
Yeah.
It was a coming of age kind of experience.
Yeah, so that's So I'm kind of liking where you're going with that, because I don't mean to talk about age so openly, but I know that you're younger than Miles and I, and for me, I guess the Scream period was my coming of age kind of period. So the whole Kevin Williamson kind of screenwriting section. So like I Know What You Did Last Summer, and even The Craft kind of falls into that, from 25 years ago now. So that's kind of like, I guess that was the point where I was quite happy to sit in that team. And Halloween H2O was also in amongst that. Again, Kevin Williamson heavily involved in that. So I get what you're meaning with that, Oscar, is my point, because I guess that would fall in line with where you're coming into, that early 2000s. So probably Final Destination may fall into that category for you as well, I'd guess.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
A lot of frosted tips.
Yeah, that's right. Cool. Well, that's kind of cool. Catching that kind of different perspective as we come through it. So let's start kind of tacking into this film and discussing the plot line. I'm going to kind of, it was a while ago since I watched it now, admittedly, because for the listeners out there, we've been trying to tee this one up for a little while. And you think, like, seeing as we're in lockdown, it'll be easy, but yeah, not so easy. But we're here, and we're finally here to kind of dissect and discuss this film. So let's delve into it. Let's look at how it opens, very much from Freddy's point of view. As we kind of come into this film straight off the bat, we have him supposedly trapped in hell, and he is at a point where he is embittered with the parents of Springwood, who have basically kind of shut him out. He's finding it hard to tap into the world, the real world that is, and find suitable victims, because the kids are forgetting him. They're not remembering who Freddy Krueger is. So he's stuck. So he tries to think of how he can get into that world by another means, which is then where we find him. So he wants people to fear him again. So he finds Jason, who we last would have seen at this stage in Jason. Jason is also in hell, and he basically disguises himself as Jason's mother, Pamela Voorhees, to convince him to rise again and go to Springwood to basically start kind of killing teens. And the idea behind that is that Freddy will get blamed again, and so his name will rise up once more, and people will once again fear him, and then he can start killing them in the dream world once more. Before we get into the rest of it, what do we think of Freddy's plan here? Is this a bit of a half-baked, far-fetched kind of idea, or did you buy it?
Oh, well.
It clearly is half-baked, but why he needed to try and get somebody else involved, he obviously wanted somebody to take most of the flack, and then he was going to ride in on his coattails and become the big sort of, it was almost like the hare versus the tortoise type race.
Yes.
Got lumbering old Jason slumbering on in, slashing people up, and then he just races it on the finish line and becomes a big nasty hero. So I don't know. Yeah.
For me, it bodes the question, and I might throw this back over to Oscar, but it bodes the question about, and I forget which one it was, and you may be able to remind me, but there was a line that Freddy says that there's always an Elm Street somewhere in America, right?
Yes.
So why then do we have to be pigeonholed into Springwood? Why can't we just make up an Elm Street somewhere near Camp Crystal Lake that's not off the beaten track to then be able to do this? Why is Springwood that necessary, do you think, to the film structure, or not?
Probably. No, not to the film structure itself, but that line was I think Final Nightmare.
No.
And that just wasn't as successful as some of the others. So
it really wasn't.
So they were like, let's they like it. They like Springwood. They like that LA shot for Springwood, and it's like this movie does have so much kind of meta narrative, kind of like the leftovers of Scream and even New Nightmare, of this kind of, because I don't think New Nightmare was like that massive smash hit. So Freddy did need someone to do literally what he does into this movie. He wasn't going to be able to come back by himself. But if you put two of the big slashers together, then he's got a chance. Now the kids are going to remember him.
Yes.
Who have stopped playing with Freddy knives, Freddy gloves, and Jason masks and all of this kind of stuff. It's just this kind of it's this real world parallel, because we start with yet another recap. We get to see him. We get to see his death. We see him. It's a real classic Nightmare on Elm Street opener. And we kind of get both of their classic openers. We get his, and then when we jump into Jason's Hell Dream, because we're not really used to seeing that much nudity in Freddy films.
No, true.
But when this big fake-breasted buxom lady starts running around, you're like, okay, this definitely feels like doesn't feel like a Friday movie. It feels like we're just dropping into a Friday the 13th film.
Yeah, and I guess that's the thing, isn't it? They've got to they have to merge these two worlds together somehow, and they have to get to it really quickly so that people people that are wanting to watch this, who have been gunning to watch this, just want to see the two powerhouses go head to head. So you've got to try and, from a script writing point of view, you've got to try and just, as I say, get straight to the nitty gritty and get stuck in. So, and I kind of like the idea of it, adding the kind of the nudity kind of element to it. Played really nicely into those that would satiate the Jason Bandcamp there, to kind of go, oh yeah, this is feeling more like a bit more Jason, because we've started so heavy on the other side of things, which is kind of interesting. So when we then kind of pick up, we basically get Jason arriving at Elm Street. He sneaks into the house where we have Nancy Thompson and Jesse Walsh, and their house where they used to live, so the iconic house in Elm Street. And it now is owned by Laurie Campbell and her widowed father. And Laurie is played by Monica Keena in this one. So she's our token heroine character for this journey. And we then, so we're basically kind of following her primarily and her friends. And her friends being, we've got Kia. I'm just trying to remember which one of these is played. Yes, Kia was played by Kelly Rowland. So to go back to what you were saying, Miles, about one of the Destiny's Child characters. So we have Kia played by her. We have Gib, and we also have Blake and Trey. For me, the big thing there was that Gib is played by Catherine Isabel, and I had a massive token crush on her since Ginger Snaps. And so,
that was a great film. Yeah.
I and American Mary, that she was in a.
That was a nice surprise. I'd forgotten she was in this.
That's exactly what I was about to say.
Really cool.
Yeah, I had the same reaction, Miles. I kind of went, "Oh my god, yeah!" And I started loving her and her character all the more. I wanted to stay in it as long as possible. But yeah, that was kind of fun to kind of see her in that role. So where was I going with that? So so we kind of get into the usual. We get introduced to these kind of people. Gib and her. Gib is a bit of a stoner, and I think, is it Blake that's her boyfriend? He's a bit of a, the token jock kind of character. So they're kind of very easily falling into these stereotype characters at this stage. But this is where we get, early on, we get the flip of the opening of A Nightmare on Elm Street first killing, where instead of the female character being killed, this is where Trey gets kind of brutally murdered by Jason, coming in with the machete, and then quite finally being bent in half with the bed, while Catherine Isabel is in the shower in the other room. But they did have sex, so one of them had to die pretty quickly.
Yeah, exactly.
Number one rule. And then we get so basically off the back of that, so there's been obviously the death, and the police turn up, and all the people are questioned over the killing of Trey. And one of the police officers, there's like a sheriff and his offsider, kind of one of them mentions Freddy Krueger. So already it looks like Freddy's plan is coming together, with the word kind of slowly being spread out there. At this point, Laurie falls asleep, and this is where she has a dream about Freddy. So she's quite susceptible for somebody that just slightly overhears a name, for then Freddy to go, I'm gonna use you as my guinea pig to kind of get into this world.
Oh yeah, there's lots of this. With how much they're kind of they need to do in this movie, there is a almost shocking amount of exposition.
Like it really
more than the first half. It's just constant. We get out for in the opening, Freddy's talking to camera, telling us all about where he's from, what he wants to do, all of that kind of stuff, and then he does it again with Laurie, and then when what are the guys called? Mark and Will. When Mark and Will come out there, there's just it's just constant exposition. which really kind of surprised me because I'm just like, no, we get it. It's Freddy and it's versus Jason. Like,
yeah.
I don't think we need that much explanation.
It does. Like, I don't know. Yeah, I guess like it's tricky, isn't it? Like you're trying to merge two very different types of films together. You know, like Freddy has always been leaning more towards that kind of camp terrain and very tongue in cheek. Yeah.
You think they were overthinking it though? Like, I mean, in the past, it's always been like, a dog pisses on the grey bones of Freddy, and suddenly he comes back to life, or a shovel is struck by lightning on the bones of Jason, and he comes back to life. It's just these things happen, and you go, okay, so they're back to life now because that happens in a horror movie. They just couldn't do that. I think they thought, oh, we've got a much more clever audience coming into it. It's like, no, fuck it, just suspend our disbelief. We don't give a shit. You know, some guy coming into people's dreams, for Christ's sake. Just take license and just go for the fences, you know?
I think
go on,
as we kind of we go into it a little bit more, I think what it could have really benefited from was a third party, not necessarily like a Pinhead or another kind of iconic character, but like give us like a satanic cult, who kind of bring them through, some other like antagonistic force or collective or character, which is kind of what Laurie's dad almost becomes. He almost becomes this kind of third party, and I think that's the spine that you use. To have the rest, to have those other two kind of come into it all. You have something that you have something kind of meaty in the middle for them to get in between.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah, I think I agree with you there, Oscar. It is missing that internal ingredient. But then I wonder if part of that they would have been worried too much about going into cult territory. Perhaps. I mean, this is where maybe, I know we're going into iconic character territory a little bit again, but maybe this is where Ash Williams would have served interesting, particularly with the nod to, and Miles, I need your assistance on this one, but the nod to whichever one it was where it was the Book of the Necromon is hinted at, and the fact that Jason could very well be one of the Walking Deadites.
Yeah, that's right.
So that could have lent favourably to what you're suggesting, even if it wasn't Ash Williams, but if it was in that world, that could have made it an interesting journey. Somebody discovers the Book of Necromon, for example, and then that's how these kind of characters come out. I don't know, spitballing. But yeah, would have been interesting. Okay, cool. This point we have so one of them's fallen. So Laurie's fallen asleep, and this is where she dreams about Freddy, and this is where he gets his powers back. Freddy then tries to attack Blake, but he's unable to harm him, and so he decides to just have a little rest for now and let Jason have some fun. And this is when then Blake wakes up to find his father has been beheaded. Awesome shot. Sitting next to him, and in a moment later is then killed by Jason. At which point the police avert suspicion to Freddy again, claiming that it was actually Blake that killed Trent and his father and then killed himself. So as much as Freddy's trying to get his hooks in, it's not working quite as well as he's planned. Yeah, so what did you like that whole beheading scene with the dad? Was that a good moment for you guys? Miles, what did you take on it?
Yeah, that was good.
Yeah. Yeah, I know you're a good fan. I know you're a fan of head explosions in films, but it was still kind of funny to have the head and the blood squirting off the top, I thought.
Yeah.
How about you, Oscar? How did you treat this kill?
I enjoyed it, but it pretty brief. I think I prefer even though was even briefer, the first kind of moment out of the opening where one of the teens throws his cigarette out the window and it just hits Jason in the mask, who's just standing outside of the window in the rain.
Yeah.
I even now, the most recent watch, I'm just like, that's great. I think that's hilarious.
Yeah. You love those little moments, don't you? Yeah.
Yeah, all of those little little moments of just of like, that's the kind of meta stuff that I like, that kind of dramatic irony of like, we know what's going to happen.
Yeah, that's cool. That's cool. Okay, so as we pick up in the storyline, so now Laurie starts having these reoccurring dreams about Freddy. She tells Kia and Gib about it, and then she's reunited with her boyfriend Will, who has been institutionalized in the Westin Hills Asylum. This happens to be the same asylum where Freddy was born. As well, so that has that kind of link into it, and along with Will is his best friend Mark, who's also was in the asylum as well. And they've heard about the murders that have been happening in Elm Street, so they decide to have a breakout, and they succeed. And we then get the rave party scene, which is in some kind of random cornfield. So talking about we at the moment are in lockdown and self-isolation zone. This is the sort of thing that, those reckless teens, they've been warned, there's been murders out there, but they still decide to go ahead and have a rave party in the middle of a cornfield.
And I probably got a friggin' virus.
That's it. So anyway... So we have this scene, and we pick up with the Gib character again. So that's Catherine Isabel's character as she falls asleep while she's under the influence, and she has a dream where she's being attacked by Freddy. After he took the form of her deceased boyfriend Trey to kind of basically lure her into a trap, into one of those. It's not a silo, is it? It's one of those kind of. I don't know what you call it. Like it's a place where they store grains essentially, and it soon forms the boiler house kind of look and feel that Freddy has, become synonymous with as he then is stalking his prey, and he's really hoping that Gib will be his first victim. As this is happening. We have another raver who, just random dude, sees passed out Gib on the floor and basically attempts to rape her, at which point Jason appears behind them and basically kills the two of them. And in doing so, that's the end of the Gib character, and she's snapped out of the dream world where Freddy was trying to kill her, and he's pissed because Jason's got one of his kills. Did you like that moment, guys? Was this whole kind of build-up kind of cool? Did that kind of add fuel to Freddy's kind of, again, this plan to try and lure people in? Did the seed there work with him starting to realize that it may not have been the best ideas to pick Jason to go around killing people?
Yeah. You're not going to send a, mindless homicidal maniac to go and do what you want to do. Yeah. So, he's going to do what he is in his tiny little pea brain, psychotic tiny little pea brain, and that's just slash, promiscuous kids up.
Yeah. That's it.
I feel like having because it's what we need. It's and when we first start the movie, we're kind of wondering where the verses is coming into. So this is where the competition starts coming in between them. Where he's screaming that she's mine. Which is like a good position for Freddy to be in because he can complain. He's the one who can speak. Even though it's kind of the early 2000s kind of rapey dude kind of come in is kind of like watching it. But now it's just kind of like, oh yeah, this is like another one of the remnants of like the 2000s where there's just a lot of that kind of vibe that doesn't have the because the movie is kind of, for lack of a better word, so polished and kind of mainstream. It doesn't have the kind of the gritty kind of terror of like kind of earlier decades, and when they would kind of have elements of kind of rapey elements coming in with horror films. In this one, you kind of like, oh, okay, it's going like he's definitely going to die. We know he's going to die.
Yeah.
We know what movie we're watching. But it's a little little icky.
Yeah, it has. Yeah.
In a similar way of what I don't know, kind of bringing it, like, even though Freddy has always kind of had this predatory kind of vibe in most of his movies, you know, lots of like tongues coming out and putting them into people's mouths and that kind of stuff. But they didn't. There was this. It didn't have that same kind of real world feel. Yeah. Of that kind of predatory nature. He was this kind of supernatural thing that's just kind of toying with people. Yeah. It's always just, you know, just a bit, you know, it's a bit gross.
It is. I understand. And particularly, like, you know, and we'll only touch on this a little bit, but the fact that Freddy is essentially a child molester, but it's never really, apart from the remake, it's never really touches on that so much. It's just kind of is a very kind of a background kind of thing. So it's never been quite that taboo, I guess. And even in this one now, like, you know, like we've had this attempted rape scene, but we're quickly snapped away from that as Jason then just goes on his killer rampage through the rave party. So we're shifting away from that very, very quickly, which, you know, is probably smart on the filmmaker's point of view, not to dwell too much on what's just happened, and just kind of get straight into the killing frenzy that Jason starts doing. And then obviously with that, this is where Freddy realizes that, my plan's not so good after all. So we then get Will, so that's Laurie's ex-boyfriend come still boyfriend character, catching up with Laurie and Keir, and there's two kind of other students who are called Freeberg and Lindemann. And they meet up with a guy called Stubbs, who's a bit of another stoner dude. And the group kind of then come up with a plan of how they're going to defeat Freddy and Jason. And they will basically, the plan is that they're going to take Jason back to Camp Crystal Lake. And that's when Laurie will pull Freddy into the real world to fight Jason. And in the real world, Jason will be vulnerable, and Jason at home in Crystal Lake will have home field advantage, as it says here. And
what could possibly go wrong?
Yeah, that's right. And then because he's back in home territory, he will no longer terrorize kids in Springwood. Is the plan. Yeah. Again, very, very, very half-baked plan. Freddy basically, at this point, this is where Freddy kills Mark. So this is the Will's friend. So he's the one that still remembers the stories of Freddy. So he's the one that kind of, he's served his purpose. He's sowed that seed as much as he can. And because of it, Freddy needs a kill at this point. So he's gone for an easy target. And he kills Mark and leaves a bloody message on the wall that basically says, Freddy's back.
I believe it's a flaming message.
That's right.
He's back, catches on fire. So we get a little pyromancy coming in.
Yeah. Kind of, and a nice effects there as well from memory.
Yeah, we're kind of left with what I think is the kind of the whittled down group now, who are like pretty decent group. I mean, how do we all feel with this group of teens out of kind of the franchises that we've kind of gone through? They're like, you know, it's not much character.
There isn't a lot.
One-dimensional.
Yeah, they are very incredibly one-dimensional. Even the Will character, the token boyfriend's a bit bland.
I mean, he's been in a mental hospital for the last couple of years, and you're going, what's your backstory? And it's like, I don't have a backstory. I just got locked away.
Yeah, for my own good. It's interesting too, isn't it? Like I kind of dug I mean, he's not in it long enough, but I kind of dug the drug dude in it. Like he is the Stubbs character. I thought, oh, he's, I don't know. I liked him. He could have hung around a little bit longer than he did. I guess he was surplus to requirements. So
we get.
But I mean, and that's essentially
because once he's dead, with that kind of whittled down group, the cop, the new rookie cop who has been kind of our viewpoint into the kind of police situation, comes out of the shadows and tells them and us again who Freddy Krueger is, what his whole deal is, and they kind of formulate their plan of getting drugs from Western Hill.
Yes.
The drug blockers.
Yeah, because there's this thing called Hypnosil, which it comes up in Dream Warriors. So this is the stuff that Nancy was taking, and she gets the kids in Dream Warriors to take. And that's why, I don't know how it comes into the storyline, but somehow that comes back into it, and that's how they know about
all the kids. All the Western kids, all the kids at Western Hill are all doped up on it.
Yeah, that's right.
And so they're like, oh, we never dreamt when we were there. I haven't dreamt in years.
Yeah, that's right. Thanks, Oscar. Yeah, that's the way in. So they realise that might be the way to kind of to do it. And obviously it all goes wrong and pear-shaped as then Jason stumbles into the Western Hill as well. And this is where, actually, I quite like the death scene of Stubbs with the electrocution thing. I thought that was kind of half decent, killing off the Stubbs character. And this is where we get the first kind of bit of a confrontation between Freddy and Jason, at which point but then this is where someone, I forget which one it is, injects Jason with 2 vials of tranquilizer.
I think it's Friedberg.
Friedberg, yeah, I think you're right.
It's our Jay and Silent Bob Jay kind of ripoff. It's the long hair beanie. That's his total vibe.
yeah. That's it. Yeah, so he's able to basically drug Jason, pass him out, and this is when. In the meantime, but as he does so, Jason then basically killed Freeberg before he passes out himself. So yeah, now we are getting down to like a nitty gritty, as you said, and we find ourselves back in Freddy's dream world, and this is where Jason realizes he was tricked, and he has to confront Freddy in Freddy's domain. And at first, Freddy kind of thinks Jason isn't afraid of anything, because he has to find the fear. He has to find what Jason is afraid of in order to kind of manipulate him in his world, essentially. But he does then find that there is this kind of he has
the
fear of water. It's all around you. And then he basically kind of lures Jason back into when he was a child and reliving that moment of when he was drowning in the water at Camp Crystal Lake. And then he starts to try and drown him in the process to try and kill off Jason. But before he does so, this is where Laurie has entered the dream world, because she has also been put under from memory. They put her under.
Yes.
And this is while are they driving back with Jason in the car with them?
They're in the mystery machine.
Mystery machine, that's right.
Driving
yeah, that's right. And Freddy. So what's happening? Yeah, so this is where Laurie appears in the dream world. She kind of interrupts the fight, and this is when Jason wakes up, and he then, whilst in the real world, and starts attacking the people in the van as they arrive at Crystal Lake. Freddy's pissed off with Laurie, attempts to kill her, but before he does so, he actually kind of lets loose that he was the one that killed her mom. And as he's doing his backstory, that's when she basically awakens and drags him into a burning cabin. I don't remember that. Why is the cabin burning? Anyway,
They've brought them in. I think Jason's chasing after them.
Yeah.
So it's as like Jason's busting in is when she wakes up.
That's it. Yeah.
It may not be burning at this very moment. That might happen when Freddy is brought through and him and Jason start their fight.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's right. And so that's okay. And then I am leaping through this really quickly. But so Jason, this is where we get the sort of the climax bit here. We've had round one while they're in Freddy's world. Now they're in Jason's world at Camp Lake. And they have another kind of fight. And this is when we find out that Freddy has the polar opposite fear, which is of fire, because he was burnt when he was.
All the elements.
Yeah, the elements, the opposite elements come clashing together. So with that, Jason basically starts to kind of beat up on Freddy, really kind of laying into him. And at this point, I don't know about you, at this point I was just like, Freddy is basically, when he's not in dreamland where he can manipulate the surroundings, he's Jason's bitch right now. Like he's got nothing to, he can't match him at all. He's just being pounded.
He's got a little kung fu. He's doing a little.
I can see the kung fu moves. That was quite funny. But that just made me like go, yeah, you're fucked, Freddy.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, look, Jason's just he's a shark with legs, basically.
Yeah.
He's just a killing machine, and so he's just this massive, like, brawny killing machine.
Yeah.
You just don't fuck with Jason, basically. You take the block and bring him down. So
yeah,
it takes at least a teenage girl to bring him down each time.
That's right. So we have whilst the two icons are going head to head, this is where who's left? We've got Laurie, Will, Keir, and Lindemann try to escape, but Lindemann is kind of wounded, and he kind of dies of his wounds. Oh yeah, Lindemann, that's right. Forgot. But I passed him like in amongst it. Like, so Lindemann is
our little nerdy.
Yeah. Chris Marquette from The Girl Next Door, and a bunch of other things as well. So he's always that kind of nerdy kind of character, nerd with a heart, basically. So kind of bypassed him. Sorry, I forgot. But yeah, he's dead, so it doesn't matter. Not without showing some morals and sticking up for Keir in amongst it. And
nice one, nerd.
And Keir kind of realizes that she may have misjudged this Lindemann. But so Lindemann has died, and Keir then tries to save Laurie and Will from Freddy, and there's that whole bit where she goes, "You ain't nothing."
Starts talking about his
junk,
your legs, he's talking about his little penis.
So which kind of made me go, relevance.
It feels like a of the period, a kind of bad stand-up comedian, kind of. It's like they're having like a slam battle. Of them, your mum is so fat, your dick's so
she calls
fat.
She calls him a faggot at this point too, doesn't she? Like, the gay slander thing comes out as well, which was a bit.
Yeah.
So there's, I know this has been quite a taboo moment for this film. Like, a lot of people have kind of slammed that particular scene, and I get why. We had the rapey scene earlier on, but this one's probably a bit more confronting in its archaic views. And I
feel like watching this movie that you're reminded of being like, oh yeah, that was
a thing.
That was a thing.
But also it kind of has no teeth in it, because I'm not against any of these taboo things being in movies. But they need a reason. It's just when they're kind of lazily thrown in, where you're like, why is she called, like, what? Like, what?
I know, and it's lame. But anyway, she gets killed, so it doesn't matter. As as Jason crops up and takes another one, which again pisses Freddy off. And so she's down and out for the equation. Freddy and Jason, so they continue their kind of fight, and this is where Laurie decides that she's going to stay until Freddy's dead, so that she can, so that they basically she's still trying to stick to their plan. Freddy seems, as I said earlier, it seems to be no match for Jason's kind of power. He's being kind of beaten left, right, and center, really quite heavily wounded. And Jason actually is quite fast in the way he's attacking Freddy, despite the fact that, as you mentioned, Miles, he lumbers, but he's been quite brutal in his savagery beating of Freddy here. During their fight, this is where Laurie and Will then find these these gas tanks that are lying around at the docks that we can use to kind of kill both Freddy and Jason in one go. And that's when we get a bit of a confrontation. Jason gets four of his fingers sliced off, and I think one of his eyes get gouged, I want to say.
Yeah, his whole arm gets cut off.
Yeah. That's right. And the fire then starts to spread from their attempt to try and burn them. And this is when Jason rips off Freddy's arm with the claws, and then Freddy grabs his own dismembered arm and uses it to stab Jason's heart with the machete.
He plunks off. Yeah, he plunks off into the water, and we just have Freddy left on the pier with Laurie.
Yeah. And this is where, but there's an explosion, isn't there, that sends them both in the lake first from the explosion of the gas tanks, and then Freddy then comes back. He attempts to kill Laurie with Jason's machete, and Jason basically then comes back out of the water for his last attack, stabbing Freddy with his own gloved claw.
Glove, yes.
And then they fall into Crystal Lake. Back again. They go back into the water again. Anyway, Laurie picks up Jason's machete while Freddy's then kneeling on the deck, helpless. She shouts at him, "Welcome to my world, bitch," and then uses the machete to behead Freddy and throws the machete into the water. At which point I had this vision of Jason's hand leaping out like the lady in the lake from Excalibur stories to grab the machete. Didn't happen, but it should have done. And then so basically he does get hold of the machete though, and Jason basically sinks under the water, and Laurie and Will kind of leave. But then we still get the end where the next morning Jason rises from the water carrying his machete and Freddy's severed head, which then turns to the camera, smirks, winks at the audience before laughing, leaving at this point the winner a bit ambiguous. I felt that was a bit tacked on for the sake of trying to level the playing field, because let's face it, as we've already said, Jason just whipped Freddy's ass pretty much there. And I think they had to, but then so a lot of people have questioned whether or not that meant that they were always in Freddy's world the whole time and not in Jason's. Anyway, but that's where we left on, and it's a way to kind of bow out. So with all that in mind, I did just try and kind of lump all that kind of last climactic kind of last act very quickly. I had to rattle through that. Most of the listeners out there hopefully already listened to or watched the film before, so they kind of know the gist of it. So what is your take on the actual kind of climactic kind of encounters between these two? We've already said that Jason pretty much was owning Freddy. Do you think there was in hindsight, was it an even matched fight, or was it a bit meh? What do we stand?
I think they tried to make it look like an even match, but I mean, it was Jason's.
Yeah.
Daddy. You're in Jason's territory here, and so that was. I mean, and this is the best part about the film. The rest of the film was just a whole lot of, bullshit exposition that we've seen about a million times before in
Yeah.
Elm Street. And, you know, it almost bordered on the never-ending story, you know. You don't believe it just appears. So, yeah. So yeah, we were just waiting for the big climax to happen, and then it was just a kick-ass fight, basically, between the two.
Yeah.
And then, so...
I mean, if you liken it to, like, obviously in the real world, when we have big heavyweight kind of boxers kind of, or UFC fighters kind of matching up to one another, that's kind of essentially what we're looking at here. We've got two champions in their own field.
Like Alien versus Predator.
Yeah, exactly. So maybe that's a good point. Like, so if Alien versus Predator, I forget when that actually came out now, but that
2004.
Okay, so after this one,
I think so.
Yeah.
So this Alien versus Predator fell flat on its face in a big way. Do you feel like Freddy versus Jason?
Because I thought that was a good film.
Really?
I don't know. I remember it being a good film. I don't know. Maybe I was just completely stoned when I watched it.
Yeah, could be.
Every film's a good film when you're stoned.
That's true.
I think Alien versus Predator is a better matchup. Than these two, because both of these two characters are stalkers and pick off their preys one by one. They're like, we don't particularly get the kind of fights, like head-to-head fights, that we have, you know, in their other kind of respective movies. And I feel like because it's pretty long. We've been waiting for it the whole kind of time, and I have no idea how they could have done it, but, like, you know, I feel like we needed more kind of them glancing off each other throughout the movie. Because with this one, you're like, Jason's probably going to win, even though they're like, oh, he's, you know, now Freddy's throwing, he's cutting the gas canisters and shooting them like missiles at him, and there's lots of set pieces.
Yes,
like, this is what the fight is now, and this is what the fight is now, and this is what it is now, and kind of constantly kind of shifting. It feels like a really kind of big drawn out video game boss battle that keeps on shifting different little locations within the same space.
Well, that's essentially what it is, though, isn't it? Like, I like your comparison there, because it really is like this whole kind of big boss battle that's coming up that you get in your video games and stuff. So, like, but I feel like you were saying, Oscar, there isn't enough prior levels in the final matchup for it to have service. I always think of, you know, Bruce Lee's The Big Boss, you know, like in that world where, like, he slowly has to work his way up to the big boss. You know, it needs something like that to kind of occur. And I even think that would be a cool way to do a new, and they are obviously doing a new Texas Chainsaw Massacre. But I kind of like the idea, and I think I've mentioned it in a previous podcast, but I kind of like the idea of doing a Leatherface film without you knowing it's a Leatherface film until the climax. So, like, we kind of get introduced to the rest of the family before they kind of, you know, go head to head and kill each other off, and then do the reveal of Leatherface. So with that in mind, like, would you ever see any of the other slasher icons coming head to head? Do you think any of the other elements would have worked, or was this the best option to go with?
Yeah.
Maybe. We'll leave that one dangling.
I think Ash Williams. I think you need a character like that. You need a hero of a horror film with those villains, because then, you know, we would care about Ash so much more than we'd care about these people. Which is what you need.
Yeah, you did. You needed somebody to come in, like, even if it was like, you know, I mean, I don't mean the actual cop character they use, but if it was told from the cop's point of view as this stuff's happening, that would have been kind of interesting. And that would have been the way into it, possibly. But obviously, then you lose the teen kind of satisfaction, kind of titillation element. Yeah, it bodes a lot of thought around it. So look, I'm aware that we're kind of coming quickly to the end of our record. So I'm just going to kind of rattle off a couple of things that I picked up on stat-wise, and then I'll ask your opinions of the film at the end and whether you'd recommend it. So the other thing I was just going to mention is that apparently Betsy Palmer was originally offered the role to reprise Pamela Voorhees, but she turned it down because the role was too small. There was Catherine Isabel had a no nudity clause in there, which Ronnie Yu tried to make her do anyway. But she kind of went, excuse me, read the fine print, you bastard. And so there was a bit of conflict on set between director and Catherine, quite understandably. There was, as I said, the fact that, I kind of mentioned this at the beginning, but no Kane Hodder for me, I think was a bit of a bad choice, personally. I didn't like the stature, all due respect to Ken Kirzinger, who plays Jason in this. And the reason they did it is because they wanted Jason to be bigger. And Kane's height wasn't quite up there. But he just didn't have that brawn and physique. So for me, it didn't quite work, unfortunately. Apparently Rob Zombie was offered to direct it. But he said, I'm going to do House of a Thousand Corpses. Apparently Brad Renfro was originally cast as Will, and that fell through. And Monica Keena said when she read the screenplay, she thought it was shit, but she signed off anyway for the money. And apparently also Jason Bateman was originally touted to play Tommy Jarvis as a different kind of angle that they were going to go with for that one at one point in the with the resurrection of that. And the last thing probably to mention is that Bob Shaye crops up. So he's been the face of New Line Entertainment. He was as Oscar and I have discussed in the past, New Line is the house that Freddy built, and he crops up as the principal and doing a cameo role in that, which I thought was a nice touch. So just ramming through a load of stats there just to fire off the bill. So let's cut to the chase. Freddy versus Jason, I'm going to go with Oscar first. Did you enjoy the film?
I would say probably not really.
Oh, okay.
I definitely not as much as when I first watched it. I think I found the kind of the exposition sludge kind of a bit too thick for me to really move through.
Sure.
And the end fight for me wasn't really kind of satisfying enough to kind of really justify it for me. Even though that I would still, I think there's some really good looking shots in this movie. Some really kind of like cool visuals as well as some not good special effects occasionally.
Yeah.
But for me, it's a weaker.
Yeah.
It's maybe the strongest of the weak films.
Okay. I see where you're going with that one. Cool. All right. So firing the same question back to you, Miles. Where did you stand with it? Did you enjoy it?
I remember enjoying it the first time I saw it, and then I think it was a bit of a task to get through it this second time. It's only the second time I've seen it. Admittedly, I watched it. I watched it a little while ago. So I was watching it on the train around sort of just before they called the lockdown. So I was sort of paranoid and paranoid for one that I was watching. I was waiting for the nudity to happen.
Yes.
So because I clicked through it so I'm watching it on my phone on the train.
Yeah.
I don't want anything. Think I'm watching some porno, and then two, I'm like paranoid because there was a girl sneezing on the other side of the train, and I was like, all right, I'm fucking dying.
Yeah.
So I think that was more scary than watching the actual movie itself. Look, it was a bit of a task, and I remember, just like waiting for the best bit, which was the fight at the end.
Yeah, pretty much.
Pretty unsatisfied by that too.
Yeah,
I think you're right about Kane Hodder though. I think there was no character.
No.
There was just such a physicality that he brought to physical, like acting that he brought to the Jason character.
I think so. Like he has a knack of acting behind the mask. So yeah.
Well, yeah. I mean, there's some guys who can do mass theatre and mass performance, and then there's other guys who just sort of wander around with a mask on. And I felt this guy just wandered around with a mask on.
Yeah, and, that's what I felt. Yeah, he was brought in for his physique rather than adding any kind of personality.
Yeah, exactly. Just swinging.
Which was a shame. Okay, as I said, we're kind of fast bound out of time. So, would you recommend it to Miles, to anyone who hasn't seen it?
Probably not.
Nice. And Oscar, would you recommend it?
Only if you've watched all the others.
Okay, you have to go. You have to sacrifice the journey for that kind of meetup.
If you're that deep.
If you're that deep, that's true.
You might as well.
Yeah, that's true. And that's kind of what we've both done. Like all three of us have done. We've been on that journey. We've gone down that road, and this is the end result. So, yeah, interesting times. So, I don't know. It bodes well. I think it's dated. Like I think you were saying that, Oscar. I think it's dated incredibly, and I think unfortunately on reviewing it doesn't hold up. Some of the tongue-in-cheek stuff does work. Some of the fight sequences nearly hit the mark. But the overall journey, just I think, unfortunately, Freddy versus Jason dies out on a whimper. There you go. I think that's our consensus on this, and it's about kind of right for us to bow out on this podcast. Cast us your thoughts and views. Are we kind of completely off the track? Did you still love the film? Do you still think it rates? Did you love that journey and the matchup between these two slasher icons? Until then, keep listening to the Surgeons of Horror team as we dissect and discuss classic horror films, both old and new. And stick around for our discussions on the new Nightmare on Elm Street remake, which came out in 2010, and we're going to have a little look at that one too to bow out the series. Until then, I'm your host, Saul Muerte, and I was joined by Oscar Jack and Miles Davies.
Nice to be here.
See ya.
Goodbye.
You're listening to the Surgeons of Horror podcast. Music supplied by Peter Nezik. For more discussions or podcasts, head over to surgeonsofhorror.com or head over to our Facebook and Twitter sites for the latest news and updates.